Stock's been up about 40% on Thursday and Friday on the back of that, the successful phase 3 and then announcing phase 4 fully funded. A lot of new targets developed as well at site. So just huge progress being made. We put out in October 2023 the 11.64 grams per ton over 108 meters. Just, obviously a phenomenal hit in oxide material.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where in the world you are signing in from today. I've got with me John Sklodnik, CEO and Director of Nevada King. John, how are you?
Great, Romeo. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. Yeah, looking forward to it. So the goal today is to kind of wrap up 2025, put it behind us, and look forward towards what Nevada King has in store for 2026. So here's how today's going to work for the folks in the room. I've got a number of questions that I have for John, and then obviously some of you have already submitted questions over email, so we'll certainly tackle those. But this is also an interactive event, so if you want to ask new questions, that chat button on the bottom right of your screen is available at any point during today's event. Please do feel free to ask any question. Likely we'll get to it. On the off chance we don't, I'll make sure that John and the team at Nevada King get that transcript afterwards, and they'll be able to get back to you separately. Only other piece of housekeeping before we get to the good stuff. This is being recorded. Will be available for replay in the early afternoon Eastern time. Expect it probably about 2 o'clock. It'll come right in your inbox. At that point, you can share it. It'll also be on Six's YouTube channel. But that's enough out of me. I want to get straight into what the point of today's event is. John, that's as we close out 2025. I'd love if you could just reflect on the year's kind of key milestones and achievements. What stands out to you most? You're looking back on the year. What has the team accomplished that you're most proud of?
Yeah, for sure. And there was a lot of reflection happening over 2025. I mean, really, I guess two lenses that I'd use to look back on the year, and one was positive. I think what we accomplished at site was hugely positive and a lot of major milestones. Namely the resource update, what was obviously a big milestone coming in June. That was just preceded by phase 2 met work as well, which was a huge milestone as well, and a lot of work went into that. So that was good. Also, some management changes as well. New board additions, me coming on as CEO. We've got a new VPX, a new CFO. So a lot of transition and a lot of good things that happened with the management team, I think, and at site. The other lens, though, would be, the stock price and very frustrating as a shareholder myself, and I'm sure for other shareholders on the call. So that's the other lens where, you're looking at the share price and just wanting a lot more. And I think the frustration emotion was because of everything happening at site and the progress being made, yet it not being reflected in the stock. So, that's something you can't directly control, and you just want to so badly. So great to see this thing finally get moving. We put out that press release on Thursday. Stock's been up about 40% on Thursday and Friday on the back of that, the successful phase 3 and then announcing phase 4 fully funded. A lot of new targets developed as well at site. So just huge progress being made. The gold price where it is, us having more targets than we've ever had, exceeding that 1 million ounce threshold. Just a lot of progress was made, and I expect, this catch-up trade to continue into 2026. There's a lot of room to make up and a lot of gap to close in terms of valuation.
No, it's exciting certainly to see it start to move. And like you said, in June, you announced more than doubling the M&I resource to over 1 million ounces at 1.14 grams per ton. Love to know, just if you can get a little technical for us, what drove this 122% increase, and what does that mean for Atlanta's development potential?
Yeah, so I mean, with that, I was, at the time, maybe naively, excited with this update. I thought it was huge. I was in equity research covering this stock. This was in line with what I was expecting in equity research. I think that there were other expectations out there floating around that, exceeded what we put out, and that caused, the share price to turn down. But, in a vacuum, this is an incredibly high quality resource. There was a lot of work that was done on infilling the area. This is an updated resource. So the previous resource showed about 600,000 ounces. Now that was based on about 75 holes, and you had about 400,000 of that in an M&I category. So I thought that was a fairly low quality previous resource that was done. Mm-hmm. So we did a lot of infill work to both justify that M&I and then push the boundaries as well. And as we're doing the infill work, we're trying to find these cross-cutting structures. And that's where you get these bonanza grades. We put out in October 2023, the 11.64 grams per ton over 108 meters. Just, obviously a phenomenal hit in oxide material. But, if you step out, 20 meters to the west, then you're getting 3 grams over 100 meters. So you can see it's still great, but you can see how important it is to find these cross-cutting faults, to find these high-grade zones in terms of capping, where this grade goes within the resource. So there was a lot of infilling that was done, and that really helped us with our understanding of the deposit. And it's now, helping us tremendously define, Silver Park, for example. So that was part of it. The other part of it was pushing the boundaries as well. So, pushing the resource envelope to the south, to the north as well, and to the west. And so it was kind of those two prongs, finding high grades within the already defined area and then pushing the boundaries of the resource. That's where we got that 122% increase.
Yeah, nice. And do you want to talk about the high grade core, which was included in the updated resource? So that 524,000 ounces, averaging 3.99 grams per ton at that 2 gram per ton cutoff. So more than triple the average grade. How important is this high grade component to the current economics of the project?
Yeah, I mean, it's that high grade core that really drives the economics. It's that high grade core that pulls the pit as large as it does. So it's absolutely critical. Having this high grade core, that's it's a kind of bimodal system where you've got this really high grade silica breccia material that's going to go through the mill, and then kind of some of the lower grade material in the non-silicified volcanics that can just be stacked on the leach pad. So it's really critical, this high grade core, both in terms of pulling that pit, and now that resource was done at about $2,200 gold, $25 an ounce silver. So now, obviously, very quickly we're very offside with our gold price assumption. But now looking at that resource, there's material that sits above that high grade silica breccia area, that high grade core. That's currently considered waste at $2,200 gold, not included in the 1.1 million ounces. But if you were to go to mine this right now, you'd probably stack that on a heap leach pad at $4,000 gold. So there's a lot of material here that could potentially be converted from waste to ore.
Sure. I know the phase 2 met results showed those strong gold recoveries with a simplified flow sheet. Can you explain how that more simplified processing approach could impact both your operating costs, but also the initial capital requirements compared to that original flow sheet?
Yeah, so the phase 1 flow sheet, that showed a 3-stage crush for the mill, and it showed a crushed material for the heap leach pad. Now, the phase 2 work that was done, which is kind of adds to phase 1, we're kind of, I guess, examining more samples. We really found that in the non-silicified volcanics, it's very insensitive to the recoveries. So we're now going to stack that on a heap leach pad run of mine. And that just means you blast the material in the pit and you just take it and you put it on the heap leach pad rather than having it go through another process of crushing, which obviously requires some operating costs as well as CapEx. From the mill, now we're going down to a 2-stage crush. So each kind of layer of processing adds both initial CapEx in terms of that infrastructure, but also adds cost to the operating costs. So to be able to go from a 3-stage to a 2-stage crush reduces both initial CapEx and OpEx. And same thing on the heap leach side of things, where now we don't need to crush it, goes straight to the heap leach pad. That's really the lowest processing method that you can have for material. And we're very fortunate to be in this oxide type of material, which allows for that heap leaching processing method. And to be able to do it run of mine, it really doesn't get any cheaper than that in terms of processing.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Now, I know Silver Park East has emerged to me as the most significant discovery, we'll call it, from phase 3. With hole 25 SP32 intercepting 0.83 grams per ton gold equivalent over 67 meters. So the highest grade hole drilled outside Atlanta, as far as I understand it. What makes this discovery so important for the district scale potential that you guys have?
Yeah, Silver Park's, I think, important on a number of fronts. When we went into the phase 3 exploration program, that was meant to find, oxide satellite deposits to both add ounces to the Atlanta resource, but also it adds some flexibility. The other thing it does is it kind of, I guess, negates the narrative that, maybe there's not mineralization outside of the resource zone. That was never our belief. But before coming on board, I know that was an area of pushback. That was an area of concern for investors. Is, all right, fine, you've got some gold in this historic pit area. Is there gold anywhere else? And now, as we're exploring around the margins of the caldera, yeah, absolutely, there is gold in other places. And so far, our most advanced target is Silver Park East. So it's critical from both those lenses here. So it's really important in terms of adding ounces and what that does in terms of, if we look at project economics and cautionary statements here, I'm getting ahead of myself. But if we were to be able to infill this and bring this into an inferred resource, now you're spreading that initial capex just over that many more ounces. You're also adding significant flexibility. If you're looking at maybe this gets processed first, we've got a drill hole, SB21, that starts 18 meters from surface. We're also exploring with our phase 4 an area close by that where we've got a drill hole that actually hit at surface. So if this is near surface, maybe this gets mined first and just increases that payback period. So that could be key. It could also just be, mined in conjunction with the Atlanta resource zone, or maybe it fills in production gaps. It just adds a ton of flexibility. This is exactly what we're looking for. And why we wanted to continue to search for more ounces, and not just put out a PEA on that 1.1 million ounces is that's part of the pushback and I guess, questions that we get from corporates when we're talking to mid-tier producers. They like the 1.1 million ounces, but like everyone and like us, they want more. And so to be able to show that there's more ounces here, to get to that maybe 1.5 million ounce level for a resource, that's what could get you to that 100,000 ounce per year production over a 10-year mine life. And I think that's really what some of these mid-tier producers, if you're producing, let's call it 500,000 ounces, that's still what can move the needle for you to get to that 600,000 ounces of annual production of potentially very high margin material as well in a safe jurisdiction.
Sure. I know early on, like when you're reflecting on 2025, you talk about bringing in some new management. I know you announced Justin Daly as VP Exploration, who, reading his background, got expertise in AI and machine learning, some of the newer mining methods. So I got two questions, I guess, really. First, I want to give you an opportunity to talk up Justin's bona fides and experience, but I also want to know how these types of advanced technologies, including hyperspectral scanning, are changing your approach to exploration, helping discover targets like Western Rim, which I'm about to ask about as well.
Sure, yeah. So, I mean, for Justin, who was CEO of another junior gold explorer in Nevada, for him to leave that position to come work with us at Nevada King, I think is just a huge endorsement for the prospectivity that he sees on the land package.
Sure.
Like any geologist, you want to find that major gold discovery, or I guess major discovery of any sort, if you're depending what you're looking for. But he sees that potential with our 130 kilometer squared land package, the caldera setting, the analog to Round Mountain, the fact that there's 25 million ounces found there. All of this stuff is obviously something that gets him really excited enough so to leave his previous post and come over to work with us. Additionally, the skill set is huge. He's got the experience exploring in Nevada and in the Great Basin. He also did a machine learning program at Harvard as well, so very well trained in that and bring a lot of that new technology to us. And you mentioned kind of how these technologies impact our exploration. We've got there were only two areas that outcropped, and that was the Atlanta pit, like where what was the formerly producing Atlanta mine, and then the Silver Park mine. So any place that outcropped became a mine effectively. The rest of the land package is generally undercover, under kind of a post-mineral cover. So the challenge for previous owners of the property was being able to look undercover without the technology. And now we're benefiting from significant technological advancements. We've been using CSAMT a number of different geophysical tools. Justin wanted to bring in this hyperspectral technology, and that's just another tool belt, another tool in our tool belt to look undercover. And we've recently put all of these different data layers through a machine learning process to come up with a ranked order of targets. And they generally corroborate what we're seeing from the field team, but it adds some new targets as well, where because we've got the existing data at the Atlanta Resource Zone, for example, and at Silver Park, where we know there's significant mineralization there already, it really proves these targets. And if we're seeing kind of the signals that these technologies show us in the Atlanta Resource Zone and Silver Park, and then we're seeing them in these other target areas, that's something that is certainly worth investigating. So they've been, these new technologies have been critical in discovering both Atlanta South, Silver Park, and now, Western Rim as well. It's been key to us investigating those areas.
Sure. And like I said, I wanted to get into Western Rim a bit because it represents a really new style of mineralization with those rock chip samples up to 20.8 grams per ton gold and quartz veins traced over 2.5 kilometers. So how does this discovery fit into your understanding of the whole Atlanta hydrothermal system?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're shocked that, this Western Rim target sits on the margin of the caldera. All of our targets do generally sit on the margin of the caldera. This is on, as the name indicates, on the Western Rim of the caldera. The Atlanta resource is generally on the Eastern Rim. So not shocked that it exists there. It is a little bit different in terms of, the style of mineralization. Yeah, these quartz veins, swarms of them extending over 2.5 kilometers with single veins extending over 1 kilometer. So yeah, pretty exciting, I think, for the team at site. One of the things that the hyperspectral showed us was this illite crystallinity really just lighting up in this area. And the other areas where it really lights up is the Atlanta Resource Zone and Silver Park. And what the illite crystallinity indicates is that there was in the past some magmatic activity. It shows that there was a significant heat happening here. That's why that shows up there. So we want to investigate this magmatic activity. Of course, a caldera is a collapsed volcano, and you typically have the magma around the edges. So all of that sort of checks out. The fact that we're seeing these same prints on the Western Rim target as we are in the other areas with known mineralization is pretty exciting. And I think for all of the targets that we have, the team at site might be most excited for this one. It does seem to show the largest potential. This could be the biggest deposit on site. It's the earliest stage one. We just added it to our list here of prime targets for us to follow up on with phase 4. So pretty excited. I mean, to have that 20.8 gram per ton rock chip sample, obviously love to see that and would love to hit some intervals with that kind of grade. So yeah, stay tuned for that with our phase 4 drilling.
Well, fun. Now, last thing about phase 3 before I get into phase 4. Phase 3 identified mineralization in Pogonip limestone at Atlanta South with the highest arsenic values on the property. But given that deposits like Long Canyon and Archimedes are hosted in Pogonip, how significant is this discovery for finding a different deposit type at Atlanta?
Yeah, I think this one's kind of similar to Western Rim in that, it's been a huge technical success, and the team at site is really excited to dig into this one and see what they have. The past operators of this property in the early 90s was Kinross and then Goldfields. And it was this target area that they were most focused on because of this Pogonip limestone, the fact that it is a common host rock for gold in Nevada. So pretty exciting, and seeing the scale of the target as well. This is another area that shows the district scale that could, be much larger than the Atlanta Resource Zone in itself. So yeah, a very common host rock for gold in Nevada. We know it does host gold mineralization. We've had gold intercepts there. And now really the challenge is vectoring in on the higher grade areas. And, like I mentioned with the Atlanta Resource Zone, when we're doing the infill drilling, if you're, we've got that one hole that's 11.6 grams per ton over 108 meters. And then you step out and you get, 3 grams over 100 meters, and then you step out further and you're at 1 gram. So we feel like we're so far on the edge here. We just got to vector into the center where we've got those higher grades, and hopefully we can find some cross-cutting structures and those higher grade zones at Atlanta South.
Okay, appreciate that. I just want to say I noticed about 2 dozen people came in a bit late. Don't worry, the replay will be available. You'll still be able to catch everything that we didn't catch at the beginning of this event. But I also wanted to direct you to the chat at the bottom right of your screen if you do want to ask questions. I'm almost through mine. I know I have long questions sometimes, but I appreciate everybody's patience. I do want to talk about phase 4 because I know it's fully funded for 20,000 meters, with 5,000 meters dedicated specifically to Silver Park East for resource conversion drilling. So, a couple questions. What are the key objectives, and what is success going to look like for phase 4 in terms of expanding that base?
Yeah, so phase 4, it's really following up on phase 3 and the 5,000 meters allocated to Silver Park East. That this is for infill and also pushing the boundaries of the resource. So right now we want to infill it. Sorry, I shouldn't say resource. We want to get to a resource.
Sure.
So right now we've got a number of drill holes, fairly closely spaced, but we want to tighten up that drill spacing to allow that to potentially come into an inferred resource if we're having success with the infill campaign. So that 5,000 meters allocated will be more than enough to both infill the area of mineralization, which so far we've traced over a 450 meter by 300 meter mineralized footprint. So infilling that. Also, we've got a drill hole about 270 meters to the southeast. So we want to fill that gap in as well. That could significantly expand the mineralized footprint. And I mentioned before, there's a historic hole that was drilled right at surface, just south of the Silver Park East. So we're also going to see if we can expand towards that. So that 5,000 meters is allocated to seeing if we can put an inferred resource together and then seeing how big that resource could be. So that's kind of the key there. The other thing that would show success is then, Silver Park East is either going to come into an inferred resource or it's not. And that's going to be critical. We believe that we've got strong potential for that to come into a resource. But then with these other 3 areas that are more advanced, being Atlanta North and Atlanta South, which were kind of focuses for exploration, being able to show that that's the next one coming up in the pipeline that is going to be ready for an infill program at the end of phase 4. So we're going to see if we can get one of those targets there. And then the other thing that came out of phase 3 was being able to backfill. So if we're moving Silver Park East now out of this kind of regional exploration area to infill, but we're still maintaining this pipeline of 3 areas for regional exploration, for earlier stage reconnaissance type exploration, and its western rim that then replaced Silver Park. So we want to have this sort of pipeline of steady targets that can potentially be added to the resource. And right now, Silver Park's at the front of that line. Western rim came up to backfill it. So if we can have success with phase 4, it's going to find that next target where, maybe Atlanta South, Atlanta North will become the next area to be infilled. And then we want to find that other, right now, we don't know what it is, but we've got a number of different areas that we want to be investigating, partly from the work that we've done for machine learning. The team at site has a number of areas that they want to be investigating. So it's finding that the next western rim to then backfill that pipeline. And, it's a massive land package here, 130 kilometers squared.
Sure.
We believe that this caldera area, which the entire caldera sits within our land package. We want to explore that entire area and just continue to backfill that pipeline. We think that there's a lot of upside in terms of resource growth, and Silver Park East should be hopefully the first one to add to the resource. But some of these other areas could dwarf the size of the Atlanta resource zone, with the Atlanta South and Western Rim namely being at the forefront right now.
Yeah, great. I know this webinar is called a Look Forward to 2026, so I wanted to wrap up my questions by directly doing that, and that's looking ahead to next year. So with +1 million ounce resource, positive met work, multiple high priority targets, and phase 4 drilling underway, investors in the room, there's quite a few of them. What are the key catalysts and milestones that they should be watching for, and kind of what's your vision for advancing Atlanta towards development?
Yeah, I think 2026, it's set up to be a big year for us with a number of catalysts. As I mentioned, infilling Silver Park, pending success there, maybe we'll be able to put out a resource estimate at Silver Park East in 2026. At that point, we haven't put out economics yet, and that's something we may look to do as well. So that would be an absolutely major catalyst. And then the other one is obviously we've got ongoing exploration.
Sure.
Phase 4 is a fully funded exploration program. We're going to be drilling Western Rim under that 20 gram per ton rock chip sample, trying to hone in on higher grades at Atlanta South, We had some success at Atlanta North too. We've only put in 7 drill holes there. We had, fairly close to surface, 0.3 grams per ton over about 37 meters. So that's the type of thing that we're looking for to add. So the fact that we've got a fully funded drill program, I think it's going to be a huge year where already I think the ounces that we've delineated, that 1.1 million ounces, they're still significantly undervalued compared to peers and compared to recent takeouts in Nevada of oxide projects. So there's the huge re-rate to happen, I believe, in our ounces that are already defined. So you're getting those ounces at a significant discount. Then you're also getting this exploration upside. I mean, if any of these areas hit, the stock is going to continue to go higher. I won't speculate on where, but obviously, if we can hit one of these areas, it would be very exciting. So we've got a lot going for us in 2026. I think because of the underperformance in 2025, there's a huge valuation gap here to be closed now.
Fun. So that's the end of my questions. But speaking of forward-looking statements, the question I got over the weekend on email is someone wrote in wanting to know what's your long-term M&I target for the entire caldera?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously pending success and forward-looking statements, but we didn't put this land package together to get 1 million ounces. We think that there's a lot more, and not that it is certainly the next Round Mountain, which has 25 million ounces or so discovered on that property. But when Round Mountain went into production, it only had 1 million ounces at that point. So we've got a very good start right now with the 1 million ounces. I think hopefully pending success. I don't want to speculate too much by throwing numbers out there, but I know that the mid-tier companies, they want to see us get to at least 1.5 million ounces. If we can have success at Silver Park, I think that's a good start. And like I mentioned, I think Western Rim could potentially be larger from what we can see from the technology that we've used. The footprint area, the scale of these veins looks like it dwarfs the size of the Atlanta resource zone. Atlanta South as well looks like it could potentially be much larger than the Atlanta resource zone. So if you got 1.1 million ounces at Atlanta, we think Western Rim could potentially be larger. Atlanta South could potentially be larger. Atlanta North feels like potentially a continuation. It is along that same West Atlanta main mineralizing fault there, so it could potentially add some ounces there. And then Silver Park is probably the nearest term. So definitely see a lot of ounces potentially to be added. Not necessarily all in 2026. There's a lot of work to be done, but see this ultimately being a multi-million ounce land package for sure.
Oh, exciting. The next person has a multi-part question, so I'll shoot them to you one at a time. They're all pretty simple questions, but I'll just kind of tack them one at a time. What drill phase does the 1 million ounce resource represent?
So it was after phase 2 that we shut off. That was a cutoff date for inclusion in that resource estimate. So that only includes a few holes that were historical holes, our phase 1 and phase 2 drilling.
Great. And so all phase 2 and 3 results have been reported?
There's still a few outstanding from phase 3. Phase 2 has absolutely all been reported. Most of that included in the resource update. Still have a few results to come for phase 3 work. And phase 4, obviously, we're fully funded. We've got a drill turning at site currently.
Okay. And then they got 2 questions, and I know there's no precise date you can give, but they want to know when we'll get the final reporting from phase 3 and when will phase 4 be actually completed?
Yeah, so I think phase 3, I mean, we should be getting those out, I don't think probably by year end, but certainly, hopefully January should be getting the rest of those drill results out. There's just a few left. And then phase 4, this should be wrapped up, I would expect, it could be the first half of the year. Probably, I think kind of through the first half, we could get through 20,000 meters of drilling. Right now, we've already started that with Silver Park is the first area for exploration. After that, I think we might we're trying to bring in a second drill rig here, and got that at site. That should be mobilized shortly. And then we'll have that at Atlanta South exploring. Next target would be Atlanta North, and then Western Rim. That'll be more of a mid-year drill target. What we want to do there is we want to get a plan of operations expanded to allow us to get better access to this area. and to really hone in on some of those targets. So in the meantime, we're going to be doing a lot of geophysics and trying to get a better understanding. There's a lot of work that we can be doing outside of drilling, and really sets up to really de-risk the targets when we're going to go in there and drill that.
Awesome, appreciate it. So I think everything
Sorry,
else.
one thing I just add to that is when we did phase 3, we initially put out a 20,000 meter program, and then it's kind of contingent on success that we might look to increase the budget on that and get to a 30,000 meter program, which is what ultimately happened at phase 3.
Oh, great, makes sense. So Bond from the chat, just to kind of wrap up this timing of everything category, he wants to know, is it likely anything else is going to be released by the end of this year, or if we're looking at January for any pending assay results?
I mean, it depends if we get something in that we really need to rush out, but otherwise, I think we typically put out a year-end summary press release. We've done that the last couple of years, so we'll put that out. And really, I think the conclusion of phase 3 and lead up to phase 4 was that kind of main press release that we wanted to get out before year-end, before things quiet down. But the next press release will probably come out in a week or two and be more of a look back on 2025. If we have some assays worth reporting with phase 3, we might include them there, but that's kind of the general plan for the next catalyst.
That makes sense. Ben Peary from the chat says, first, congrats on the share price finally waking up, which obviously I echo too. But he wants to know, in terms of the upcoming drill program, he wants to know if you can settle investors' stomachs on cash balance and when the next raise was likely to be, if it's in the immediate future. He also wants to know if you can touch on the low cost of exploration.
Yeah, for sure. And I think those kind of work hand in hand, where we put out our last financials as of September 30th, that showed 8.55 million Canadian in cash. We really are fortunate for low cost drilling. It's about $80 $80 a meter here to be drilling, and that benefits from the infrastructure on site. The fact that we drill RC, when the drill crews come, they can typically stay at site, and so that negates the per diem cost. So it's really, I think, as low cost as you can get for drilling in Nevada, particularly. So when you look at that, if you could just do the math there, $80 a meter. A 20,000 meter drill program, I think you're around $2.5 million. So we're very comfortable with our budget. Can certainly get through the first half of the year. We don't want to be slowing down drilling to extend it, but we certainly don't want to be doing an equity raise at levels near where we're at. So that's kind of the balance here. We want to have success at the drill bit, and I think that's going to help the valuation. If we can put out a resource update at Silver Park, I think that's another massive catalyst for the valuation as well, both showing that how quickly we can turn around a resource. We put out the Atlanta resource in June. To be able to shortly put out an addition at a new regional target, I think would be huge for the market, as well as showing, if we're able to do that, could show a very low discovery cost per ounce with that the $80 a meter drilling. So all that said, that's kind of what we're looking at. Can certainly get through the first half of the year and beyond, depending on pace of drilling. But yeah, right now, kind of the 20,000 meters, I think in itself would cost about $2.5 million.
Great. Oh, appreciate that. One fun question from the chat. They want to know if you could touch on how your experience as a research analyst helps you get the best ROI for investors, and who else on the team complements your skill set.
Yeah, I think you have a certain lens. I think when you're looking at these companies in equity research, kind of done a really good job in terms of trying to put as much money into the ground as possible. Those are kind of the two areas that I'm pretty focused on, is making sure that we're being very efficient with our budget and drilling. We've really reduced the amount of money going to G&A and management. We've had some management changes. We no longer have an executive chairman. We just have a chairman, and so the board just makes a standard amount for myself, a CFO, and so that's pretty key, I think, in terms of making sure that all dollars go into the ground and and are well used. And my real focus here is, letting the site team really figure out, where to drill. Obviously, with I think some overview on what's going to get the best ROI, and making sure that we're drilling to an inferred level. I don't think, at these regional targets, I don't think we're getting a whole lot of additional value in terms of going to an M&I resource over inferred. So, how do we drill to 100-meter spacings to bring that into an inferred? We don't need to be drilling, more beyond that. Let's keep that for regional. So it's really kind of, I think, using that lens, trying to maintain the balance, the balance sheet as strong as we can, and be as efficient as we can with the dollars spent. And I think that was partly, I think making sure that as much dollars are going to exploration and not towards management salaries, and making sure that management's well aligned. That's always something that I really wanted to see when I was looking at companies, and that was one thing that gave me a lot of comfort with coming over to Nevada King, was that the management and insiders own about 37% of the stock. Also that this is a story that resonates with institutional investors and with corporates. So when I was in equity research, kind of testing that narrative with the institutional investors I'd speak with, and talking to other corp dev groups. And so continue to get that strong feedback from those groups. I guess the other thing would be just bring in a strong team that has fun, that wants to be doing this, that enjoys working together. And we've got a really good team at site that hasn't changed at all. The same group there, they know this project better than anyone. They're a group that likes to explore, that likes to find gold. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and really happy to have made the move over from equity research to Nevada King. It's been a lot of fun, a good challenge, I think, for 2025, and man, I'm fired up for 2026 for sure.
Amazing. Well, I can't imagine a better note to wrap on than that. So, John, I'll say thanks so much for running through. I know I threw a lot of questions at you, and so did folks in the chat and over email. It's really appreciate your willingness to go through it. If anybody here, I know there's a big group of you, has any additional questions, please do let me know. I'll make sure that we pass those right along to John. But thanks, everybody, for joining me. And, John, I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Romeo, and thanks, everyone, for tuning in.
Cheers.